How concerning is this to you?
Well, it's very disconcerting. The idea that there's been a green light across North America for people to be violent towards politicians. And, we know federal politicians have been the target in Ottawa, and many people are hesitant to run for political office because of it. And now it seems to be more and more in our local scene with Bernadette Smith's office, as well as the constituency office for Nahanni Fontaine. So it is really disconcerting. But as you said, Marcy, we don't know exactly if it's a target, but I mean, the probability is that it is.
Well, what concerns you about the timing of yesterday's fire?
Well, I was at the Orange Shirt Day at the Forks yesterday, and I saw Wab Kinu's remarks and his speech, a very dignified speech he gave. And also, a lot of people there did not realize that Nahanni Fontaine's office had been vandalized. The peace ceremony started at 10. People had left their homes at 9 to be at the event. So people weren't sure as to exactly what Wab Kinu was talking about, but now everybody does know. But I would say that it is disconcerting. Not Nahanni Fontaine's a very high profile First Nations woman who's been in the assembly since 2016, so close to a decade, and she's had a couple of high profile issues politically over the past 6 months. So it's disconcerting that even if people disagree with her, and many people do, that there might be this action taken, that there's some sort of green light to be violent. And Marcy, these offices, constituency offices, are fairly high profile. They're on usually high traffic streets. They're places where people go in to get some help, to get information, to maybe contact the MLA or find out how to contact the MLA. So they're high profile places, and they're staffed by one or two full-time staffers who could be in the office when the arson occurs, even if it's overnight. Sometimes people are working late at night in the constituency office, so it's very dangerous. It's not just property, but it's a threat to life.
You somewhat answered this, or you reflected on hearing the premier, but we also heard the mayor there. I'm just curious what your take is on how they addressed what was happening.
Well, I think, the fact that we look to our political leaders to talk about calm and to talk about the ballot box is the important place to voice your concern. And also, it's not just the ballot box, it's peaceful marches like what happened yesterday. There's a sea of orange shirts, thousands and thousands of people marching from the Forks to the convention center. So those are the ways by which, in a democracy, people look for change and without threats to people's lives. But Marcy, this is not the first time in Manitoba we've had violent action. Manitoba is the first province to come into Confederation with gunshots. I mean, somebody says that, but we had bombing of the Franco-Manitoban Center in the 1980s. We had the Ku Klux Klan in Saskatchewan and Manitoba during the 1930s. So it's not like brand new, but at the same time, it's very disconcerting for those involved with democracy that this would be happening now.
I just want to ask you about democracy. I want to ask you about the offices. You were drawing that picture, Christopher, of like people going there, that they're accessible. They're in highly visible places in our neighborhoods for a reason. What could the impact of vandalism and potentially, if it's found to be arsons like this, have on people in the area in connecting with things that they need?
Well, it's true. People might be worried about going to the office itself. I understand Bernadette Smith's office closed briefly with a sign saying how to contact staff. These offices, and there's the issue with Spruce Woods when that by-election took so long to be called. These offices are community offices. There are places by which people can go in. They might not know the difference between federal, provincial, or civic services. They go in. They say, I'm having trouble with I'm trying to get my mother to come in from overseas to be a landed immigrant, or I haven't got my welfare check and I don't know what to do, who to call, or I have an issue with my neighbors, that my neighbors are a problem to me. These sorts of things are the type of things that just walk in the door, and they might not be something that the constituency office can respond to right away, but there is somebody there as a kind of a traffic person to know where to direct these types of services. So they're important. The other thing, Marcy, is we have to keep in mind there are three types of offices an MLA operates with. One is the one in the legislature, and if you're a cabinet minister, you have a cabinet minister's office. Secondly, you have a campaign office that's just temporary. It's when a campaign is underway, and that's where signs and volunteers, etc. And the third type of office is the constituency office, and that, in some ways, is the most important office for the neighborhood.
So speaking of context and wider context, I want to talk about this Nahanni Must Go rally. That's what it's called. It's at the Legislative Building today. One of the organizers is Patrick Allard. He has run against previously Fontaine and St. John's. Now, he told CBC News that if this fire at Fontaine's office was in fact an act of arson, he wants the culprit to be, quote, put in jail for a long time. So I just want to put that out there in his response to this. But what are your thoughts on a rally like this being held in the current political climate and in this moment?
Well, we have seen rallies lately. Another one was when Kirk was assassinated in Utah. We saw, a convoy in front of the legislature. The legislature is a place that draws rallies, both at left wing and right wing and populist rallies, etc. So, but I can understand a spokesperson for a certain movement on the right would be saying that arson is not the correct way, and I think he's probably right in his convictions. But I would say that it is problematic that the door has been opened to attacks on certain politicians, and some people read this as a green light for arson. Preston Manning, who was the head of the Reform Party, which was a peaceful party, but on the right side, there were racists and people who were sometimes out of control, and he didn't lead them, but they were attracted to the Reform Party, and he said moths are attracted to light, and I think that's what happens here when you have demonstrations that can attract other people that you might not want at a demonstration.
Is it irresponsible though? Because those that are putting on protests and rallies, like the timing of this, then, like, should the brakes be put on if, as you're saying, they're not responsible for any action that would happen if someone comes? I'm not suggesting that, but they could make a choice to sort of separate, given that this just happened yesterday. I guess I'm curious whether or not the timing should be considered or maybe reconsidered.
Yeah, I don't know the logistics behind this gathering and what went into it and what the versatility is for this. But I myself, as a citizen, would hope that it would be postponed.
You mentioned the states. I mean, you mentioned Charlie Kirk, and obviously things resonate here across the border. We are seeing in the United States a different level of a very clear political violence. How much is that impacting us here in Canada, do you think? Obviously, you drew examples in our Canadian history of violence being in our own past, but I wonder whether or not we're more closely, aligned, or people's, are online. We're all interconnected on Facebook and social media. Whether that fuels any of this potentially, if it's proven to be political violence here.
Marcy, as I was telling your reporter Josh Crabb yesterday, we've had targeted synagogues. Anti-Semitism is really on the rise in Canada. Anti-Muslim activities are on the rise, and to some extent, Christian churches, arson against them. But there is a huge rise in anti-Semitism and anti-Muslim behavior, and a lot of that is connected to what was happening in the United States over the past 4 to 10 to 15 years. And look, we've got a president south of the border who is very much against immigration, very much against people who are part of the so-called culture wars. He speaks against woke, and that sort of rhetoric has opened the door for up here. My college, St. Paul's College, we sponsored refugee families to Canada, and the mood about refugees from Syria and Afghanistan 8 years ago is radically different than it is now, and the tolerance or the welcoming to people who are refugees has changed, and I think in large part that's because of what's happening in the United States.
Thank you for your analysis as always, Chris.
Thanks, Marcy. Have a good week, eh?
Yeah, you as well.